Thank you all for joining us for our weekly Thursdays at 3 o'clock Issue at a Glance video. This is our second one, so thank you for joining. We will now have these every Thursday. Tune in to our Facebook and YouTube pages. We'll give you an update about an important issue that's impacting Wisconsin, although today we're actually giving you an update about a bunch of issues because we have a huge opportunity to make a difference on many things that threaten Wisconsin. The governor's task force on climate change is wrapping up its public comment portion of its work, and we have until July 31st to submit comments. In case you're unfamiliar with the task force on climate change, Governor Evers committed the state to getting to 100% carbon-free energy by 2050. And he followed that up by creating a task force that's filled with business leaders, nonprofit leaders, elected officials, people in his cabinet, and others who are working together to put the plan together that will determine how we're going to get to 100% carbon-free energy. The task force just held 5 virtual hearings. Between 150 and 200 people attended and talked about a range of concerns. Many Sierra Club members attended those, and many of the things that were brought up you'll hear today. But we're working to ensure that those main asks we have of them will get solidified by submitting them in writing and hopefully get into the plan they put together. So today we'll go through some of the things we're asking for and hope that inspires you to come up with your asks and submit comments. You can submit comments in 2 different ways. You can go to the Climate Task Force's website and submit comments there at the first link. And the second link is our page if you want to use our sample comment and just edit it or modify it the way you'd like and submit it through there. Both of these will be in the comment section below, either on Facebook or YouTube, so you don't have to worry about writing these down. We'll also link to the details that we talk through as we work through these about our specific policy asks. So while we dive into some of the details, we have 2 overarching asks. The first is to make a bold and ambitious plan to stop climate change. We only have till 2030 to do so, according to the International Panel on Climate Change. So we need a really bold plan that will guide us in this next 10 years, and to consider equity and environmental justice in every proposal and policy that moves forward. Underneath those 2 big umbrella asks, we have some specifics that fall into these 6 buckets, if you will. Electricity sector, getting to 100% clean energy, not allowing any new fossil fuel infrastructure, making sure our transportation sector is carbon-free, managing our forests to sequester carbon, adapting agricultural procedures that also help in sequestering carbon, and supporting our local communities as they lead the change. So now we'll dive into some of these details. So first, I will hand it over to J.D. Sonata, who will talk about our goals to get to 100% clean energy.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, my name is J.D. and I'm a campaign coordinator with the Wisconsin chapter of the Sierra Club. And so I'm just going to give a kind of brief outline of what our asks are in terms of 100% clean energy. First, we definitely want to create a plan to retire all of the coal plants in Wisconsin. We don't want any more created. We don't want any more gas plants created. And as we do this, we want to make sure that we are focusing on producing a just transition as well, which includes protections and resources for the workers and the communities that rely on those plants for jobs and for energy. And so a piece of that just transition is working on initiating long-term planning for Wisconsin utilities. And so that is ensuring that they have a plan for addressing energy efficiency and converting to renewable and clean energy sources as they move forward in the future, to make sure that the process is maybe not seamless, but there is a plan for it. And then kind of related to renewable energy, one of our asks is to allow third-party solar financing or leasing in Wisconsin, which is really important because one of the big barriers to solar energy is just upfront cost of buying those panels. And this leasing plan allows customers to pay monthly instead of that one big initial chunk, and allows people to much more easily access the benefits of solar energy without having that barrier. Another thing that we wanted to highlight was making sure that we're investing in energy efficiency programs, which I think we're also going to talk about a bit later. But we want to make sure that we are reducing energy costs and prioritizing low-income communities, since they are so often unfairly burdened with energy costs. This is a place where we really want to highlight environmental justice. Of course, that's like running through all of our plans, but here in particular, it comes up and is really relevant. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention was just that we wanted to build out a plan for offshore wind on Lake Michigan, which would be a really great and much more local source of energy than, for example, bringing in coal from states away. It's renewable, it's close to us, and it's definitely a resource that we want to focus on. So there's definitely a lot more components to getting to 100% clean energy, but this is an overview. And of course, we have more info that we will make accessible to you if you would like it.
Great, thanks, Jadine. So as Jadine mentioned, we have to get rid of our fossil fuels now and transition to 100% clean energy. And one of the things we have to make sure we don't do in the meantime is build any new fossil fuels. So now I'll give it over to Michael, who will talk about the need to ensure we don't have build any new fossil fuel infrastructure.
Hi, thank you. My name is Michael Rahani, and I'm a legislative and electoral project aide with the Sierra Club. I'll be talking, as Ms. Ward mentioned, about no new fossil fuel infrastructures. As the slideshow says, there should be a moratorium on fossil fuel infrastructure, and we can look at this for three main reasons. First of all, it does a large environmental harm. Second of all, it has led to the injuries and deaths of many people. And lastly, it disproportionately harms lower income communities. So first of all, we can take a look at the Line 5 pipeline, which is proposed by Enbridge Company. Enbridge Pipeline has, since 1968, had over 1 million gallons of oil spilled. Oil spills are detrimental to the environment as they make areas uninhabitable to wildlife. They can lead to the death of birds, fish, and other aquatic organisms, and more. Even if these organisms are not immediately killed, they oftentimes deal with severe chronic injuries. For instance, birds oftentimes are damaged and are unable to fly. Marine mammals who eat fish may be affected because if the fish are contaminated, they'll be eating contaminated fish and more. Furthermore, oil spills do have a very negative impact on, well, humans. The Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration has reported nearly 8,000 pipeline incidents, not just from pipeline, but just in general, from 1986 to 2013, which has not only caused billions of dollars in damage, but has actually injured 2,000 people a year and has killed hundreds. Now we can also look at the Namiji Trail Center gas plant. This should not be permitted because while some people may think that gas plants are cleaner than oil because it has a lower carbon emissions. Unfortunately, gas plants have a tendency to release methane, which is another very potent greenhouse gas. As a result, gas plants are actually not safer or not this clean alternative energy source that might be believed. Furthermore, as I previously mentioned, and as my partner Jadine mentioned, oftentimes we see the effects of, dirty energy not like affecting low-income communities, and the Namiji Trail Center gas plant would be no different. It's going to be located in, also like planned to be located in Superior City, Wisconsin. Superior City, Wisconsin has a poverty rate of 15%, which is 4% higher than Wisconsin's poverty rate as a whole. On top of that, the median income of Superior City is only three-quarters that of Wisconsin as a whole. As a result, this gas plant would just be furthering the issue of people of lower income communities bearing the brunt of the damages caused by gas plants and by pipelines. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Nobody from our transportation team could be here today, so I'll just talk a little bit about our goals for building out a carbon-free transportation sector. The transportation sector is actually now the largest source of carbon emissions of all sectors, so it's really important that we start getting serious about creating a transportation system that will be sustainable into the future. So the first thing we need to do is put a moratorium on any new highway expansions. This is especially important right now, as there was a renewed proposal for the I-94 east-west corridor in Milwaukee to be expanded. We know that expanding highways actually lead to more congestion, so they don't solve any congestion problems, and they encourage more driving, and more driving at higher speeds, more traffic. All of these things lead to more carbon emissions, as well as more pollution for the neighborhoods near the highways. We need to shift that funding from highways into public transit and biking and walking infrastructure. People who use transit and biking and walking infrastructure have not had the same investment the way people drivers have, and they need this investment in order to ensure they have access to the places that those of us who drive have. So that includes hospital visits, jobs, schooling, and any other needs. We need to make sure we're emphasizing funding the transit expansions that connect marginalized communities to employment hubs. I'll link below our report Arrive Together we put together, which showed that low-income communities have some of the least amount of access within cities to the top employers in the region. The Department of Transportation should allow communities to adopt the NACDO guidelines. This is a little wonky, but these are guidelines that essentially allow local communities to invest in biking and walking and transit infrastructure in an effort to help with their transportation issues. We want all state-funded streets to be complete with sidewalks and bike lanes, so restoring complete streets. And we need to build out an electric vehicle infrastructure for those who have to drive where transit won't work. We need to ensure all those cars are electric and using clean energy, and a inner-city rail network through Wisconsin. Now I'll hand it over to John to talk about the ways we can use our luscious forests here in Wisconsin to sequester carbon.
Hey, it's John from the Lands team, and here's a couple of points we'd like you to consider when making comments for Governor Evers' Climate Task Force. The first is to encourage preservation of existing lands and parks when evaluating infrastructure projects. This is especially true for our existing old-growth forests throughout the state, which are holding tons of carbon we don't want to risk being released back into the atmosphere. The second point we'd like you to include in your comments is to increase the access to public parks with a focus on the youth and low-income families who may otherwise not be able to experience and learn about the great outdoors.
Great, and now I'll hand it over to Jadine to talk a little bit about how we can similarly use our agriculture to benefit the sequestering of carbon.
Thank you. Yes, it's me again. So I'll be talking about agricultural procedures, thus practices, which are really important. Agriculture is a huge industry, especially in Wisconsin. And there's a lot of practices that can be used to help sequester carbon from our atmosphere and bring it back to be stored in the ground, as opposed to letting it loose and having it be a really bad environmental impact, which I'm sure you've all heard about. So we want to make sure that we're incentivizing these sustainable agricultural practices. There's huge differences between large-scale conventional farms and maybe smaller scale organic practices, or just environmentally friendly and sustainable practices. And so it's important to understand what that difference is and that there are practices that you can promote and utilize that will help bring carbon back to the earth as opposed to releasing it. Part of that, connected, I guess, is promoting a local food production and consumption system, which one will reduce the fossil fuels emitted as the food is transported. That's a really huge emissions factor for the industry as a whole. And if we're promoting local food, we're also bolstering the local economy and supporting the smaller farmers, especially those with good practices in our area, which is really important. Another point I wanted to bring up was ensuring that all communities have access to healthy local food and food that they want and is appropriate for them. So this is another place where I'll just highlight equity and justice. Food justice is really important. Everybody needs to have access to nutritious food. It's obviously crucial to our health and is really important if we're creating a strong community in society and state. And then I'll come back to specific environmental practices. So carbon sequestration, there's like a lot of things you could talk about. We do want to make sure that we are minimizing our dependence on synthetic fertilizers and instead using like compost or other, like you can use legumes and things to increase your nitrogen content, and that is much more effective at bringing carbon back to the earth, not being harmful to the environment. Then you can also think about minimizing pesticide use as well and maximizing crop rotation and soil health, again, which increases sequestration and works with the microbes in your soil, which then leads to more nutritious and healthy food. All of it is all connected. And the last thing that I wanted to mention was that we are advocating for incentivizing grazing and the creation of a plan to convert some cropland to grass or forest, which is again pointing back to carbon sequestration in terms of just the actual like mass of grass and trees, which can store carbon from the atmosphere. So that's what I have. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And finally, there's really the places that have been leading on carbon or climate action here in Wisconsin are our local communities. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary and then Kaden to talk about ways that the state can put a plan together that supports local communities in leading the way and figuring out what works best for them.
Thanks, Elizabeth. My name's Mary. I'm a volunteer with Sierra Club Wisconsin and the Four Lakes Group in Madison. So as Elizabeth mentioned, a lot of climate work goes on at the local level, and I think that's more true these days than ever, since we're not seeing a lot of guidance at the federal level. And a lot of folks might wonder, well, what does the state plan have to do with local communities? Local communities need support from the state. They don't often get as much funding as they would need to put these ambitious plans in action. But there are a number of communities that already have goals for seeing non-fossil fuel energy by 2030 or 2050. Sorry, my cat is now photobombing us. We would like to see that the state would support ambitious local climate action by providing funding for climate action on the local level for the planning and removing. There are a lot of preemptive measures that are stopping communities from meeting these goals that we would need to have the legislature remove from the books right now. So in addition to just funding, we need legislative support, additional home rule authority, and the ability to modernize land use policies that prioritize infill and decrease suburban sprawl. A lot of most localities are in charge of their own zoning. We need comprehensive zoning and planning ability at the local level that will help localities not only reduce energy consumption, but also prepare for resilience plans to meet climate disasters like flooding. And as we touched on earlier, we are also trying to create climate-friendly transportation policies, and that is largely done at the local level. So we would like the state to support our climate-friendly zoning, transportation, and land use policies so that the work can get done basically with boots on the ground, which is going to be a lot at the local level. And finally, we'd like to see the state create plans that support climate change resilience and strong local economies. I think there's not a lot of room to question anymore that climate change is here and we have to deal with it. And a lot of that is going to involve creating resilience plans for communities to quickly respond and bounce back when these disasters like flooding do strike, so that our communities and our economy are not completely blindsided when these hit. And the best plan is one that will allow local communities to get back on their feet quickly by anticipating and preparing in advance for climate disasters.
Hi, I'm Caden Metal, and I wrote the Energy Efficiency Policy Memo to Governor Evers' Task Force on Climate Change. In this memo, the Sierra Club asked the task force to take aggressive action in prioritizing clean energy and funding energy efficiency. Wisconsin's fossil fuel use is costly to its economy, environment, and its people. By making the transition to 100% clean energy by 2050, the state can ensure an environmentally conscious future that would benefit all sectors. The Task Force on Climate Change can implement policies that would provide incentives for this transition. For example, further funding and expanding Focus on Energy would further empower businesses and individuals to move towards energy efficiency. Wisconsin also needs to modernize its policies and procedures at the Public Service Commission to continue providing safe, reliable, and environmentally friendly utility options. With the decisive help of the Task Force on Climate Change, Wisconsin could take monumental steps towards combating the climate crisis and ensuring a future that would benefit all Wisconsin citizens. I hope this policy stance makes sense.
Thank you. So just a final reminder, I hope that all of these really important topics inspired you to want to submit comments and helped you kind of think through what you want to be asking the task force to include in the plan. Just a reminder, those comments are due July 31st at the end of this month. Here are the 2 links where you could go to submit them. And you can also, we'll put these in the comments below so you don't have to write these down. Thank you for joining us. As a reminder, tune in every Thursday to get a glance at one of our issues, and subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook so you can always see these as they come.